It's nice to see you all today. My name is Erin Metz. I'm an accessibility specialist with the Disability Equity Office, and we're here today to talk about the Presenter's Practical PowerPoint Guide. So just a very quick and brief accessibility notice is that this presentation has errors in it. So if you are sharing this presentation with anyone, perhaps someone on your team, please leave this accessibility notice in here so that everyone is aware that these errors were intentional so that we can work together to correct those errors. As for our agenda today, I'm glad you're all here because it is really important to be part of a culture that is supportive and embraces accessibility. So today we're going to go over some general PowerPoint accessibility tips. We'll talk about how and when to use alt text, and then we'll work together to remediate all of those accessibility issues that are found in today's presentation, and hopefully leave plenty of time for any questions that you might have. However, I do want to have a little disclaimer of that I'm not a disability or a digital accessibility expert. So it was pretty recent that I learned all of these tips and tricks that I'm going to share with you today. But I want you to know that if I can learn how to do this, so can you. But I also want to share that I do not have all of the answers. So it's very probable that you may ask me some questions today that I just am not going to be able to answer, but I will definitely refer you to someone who can help you with whatever those questions might be. And lastly, I want to state that our office does not assist with PowerPoint remediation on a large scale. So what that means is that it's really important for you all to learn all of this information for yourselves and be able to apply it when you're creating presentations. This is really important because part of the University of Michigan Standard Practice Guide tells us that we have to make accessible technology. So whether it's creating a website or any kind of document, like something from Microsoft Office or a Google Doc or an Adobe product document, even digital textbooks, they all need to provide equal access to individuals who have disabilities and for those who do not. So regardless of what your role is, whether you are in a specific unit, whether you're faculty, whether you're staff, this policy applies to all of us. So let's get started on some general accessibility tips and the web content accessibility guidelines that kind of give us those ideas of what we need to do to create our accessible presentations. So our first tip is to keep the accessibility checker running while you're working. So we can turn this on by going to the Review tab up here at the very top ribbon of our screen, and then clicking on Check Accessibility. So prior to our presentation today, I sent out a copy of the slides. If you don't have those available, let us know and we can send you another copy. You can choose to follow along in that presentation with us today, or you can just be a participant and watch as we go through this presentation. So going back to that accessibility checker, if you leave it running while you work, you'll see down here in the lower left corner of your screen, mine says Accessibility Investigate, which it's reminding me that I have an issue somewhere in my presentation that I need to address. However, if it were to say accessibility, good to go, sorry about that, it's telling me that the accessibility checker has not found any current issue that I need to address. There are some limits to what the accessibility checker can find, but that's why we're here today to go over what all of these new guidelines are and how we address those. Another tip is to create and use a slide master. So what slide masters do is they allow us to make an adjustment on a single slide, which could be for our font size, the typography we're using, paragraph spacing, all of those things we can adjust on that slide master, and then they will then apply to all of the slides in our presentation. If you don't know how to create a slide master, that's okay. You can download a customized template from the website, and then you'll be able to modify that to kind of fit your unit or whatever your presentation is specific to. And the last tip on this slide is that less is more. We want to keep our slides simple. You'll see as we go through the presentation today, I don't have a lot of imagery. I don't use a lot of colors or special effects. It may not look as pretty as some other presentations out there, but this is what we can do to really make our presentation much more accessible. Some more tips are to keep the information that you're sharing in your slides and your speech consistent. What that means is we're trying to speak directly about what is on our slide so that we can either use the ability to hear or to see, or maybe both of those concurrently, maybe to experience all of these things, creating multiple different ways for learning and understanding what our content is. We also, if we're using images or diagrams, want to read what is in those images or those diagrams aloud. We also want to share poll or survey results. And then any Q&A or chat messages that we might be responding to, we want to read those aloud as well before we answer those questions. We can also create sections in our slides, so it's easier to understand when we're changing our topic. You'll see each new section header of mine looks vastly different than my content slides, so we know when we're switching directions. And the last bit of tips I have for you are to avoid overuse of effects. So in some presentations you might have seen, the images come onto the screen, or perhaps they make a fun little picture. Sometimes that extra motion or those strobing or flashing effects can really impact people who might have some photosensitivity. We can also utilize bullet points and lists. This helps with clarity and being able to easily understand and read the information. We really want to try to minimize using paragraphs to share information. And our last tip is to just use plain language and common words, which can be helpful for anyone to try to process the content that we're sharing. Moving on from our general tips, let's talk about those web content accessibility guidelines. So if there's any one slide that I really want you to pay attention to during our presentation today, it's this one. So this is all information that we're sharing with you, the minimums that are required under the WCAG, but these are not always picked up by the accessibility checker. So these are just some of those things that you kind of just need to know or need to remember. So take a photo, write this down, save slide number 10 somewhere where you can access it easily. So our first content guideline is that our minimum font size should be 16-point font. However, we always recommend a little bit larger than that. So think about if you're presenting in a live room, can the people who are sitting way in the back still read what is on your slide? So our recommendation would be to up that font size to either 18 to 24 point for anything that's in our text or content area on our slides, and then go a lot larger for anything that's a heading or a title. So anywhere from 26 to 44-point font. What I'm using here on this slide is 24-point font. So much larger than that minimum, but it can even still be hard to see from way back in the room. Our minimum line spacing should be 1.5. This is referring to that space that's in between each of the different lines of text. And having that space there makes it easier to read, easier to delineate those little bullet points. And then our last bit of content guideline here is the minimum space after our paragraphs should be 6-point. We always want to adjust our paragraph spacing rather than just hitting the enter key as well, because if someone's using a screen reader, they're just going to read line, line, line each time you hit enter. So try to avoid hitting enter and instead just adjust that spacing for your paragraphs. Okay, so now we're going to talk about our fonts or our typography. So there's two different types of fonts. There's serif and sans serif. So you'll see on the slide here our sans serif, or serif, are fonts without serif. Fonts without serifs are a little bit easier to read. They're kind of block letters and they don't have all of the extra embellishments that our serif fonts have, which is on the bottom of our screen. So each of those red circles are identifying those serifs, those extra embellishments. Those can sometimes make the text harder to read, especially if we don't have appropriate font sizing or line spacing. So we recommend some sans serif fonts. I'm using Verdana throughout the presentation today, but some other examples are Tahoma, Arial, and Lucida Sans. I'd say those are some of the most common accessible sans serif fonts. In my serif example, this is a font called Garamond, and you can kind of see that if we were to bunch those letters all together, they kind of start to blend and almost look a little bit like cursive text. Let's talk about slide titles now. Our slide titles should be very concise. They should relay meaning so that if we're trying to navigate through our document, we can quickly and easily find the slide that's talking about slide titles. Our titles should also be unique, meaning that no two slides should have the same title. So before in the presentation, I had 3 different slides that mentioned general guidelines. So if you have a lot of information in one category, you'll use 1 of 2 and 2 of 2, or you can just say continued so that you have different slide titles for each of those that are still related to the same topic. And now to talk about links. We all see links a lot in our digital world, but we should make sure that our links are visually distinguishable from other text. So we don't want to underline any text in any of our presentation slides unless it is a link. So if we want to show some emphasis, instead of underlining, let's use bold text or italics, or maybe both of those at the same time to show that emphasis. When we're using our link text, it should describe what's going to happen when we click on that link. So for example, some helpful link text would be learn more about accessibility. It quickly and easily tells us that when we click on this, we're going to get more information about accessibility. Or our other example of digital accessibility help with ECRT. It cleanly and plainly describes where we're going to go when we click on that link. Some not helpful link text would be click here, follow this link, read more. We see that one a lot. All links should also have unique names, so it's obvious they're going to different destinations. So we don't want to have a screen that is full of links that all say click here. So an easy way to help identify if you have good link text is to ignore all of the surrounding content or other language on your slide. So if you are reading just that link text, is it clear where you're going? So now I want to talk about color contrast. So we're going to see a couple different images here of the color contrast analyzer tool, which you can download directly from the Software Center. I keep mine saved to my desktop or pinned to my desktop so I can use it anytime I need it. So we'll see in this first image here on the left, there's an eyedropper tool in that color contrast analyzer tool where you can pick up your background color. So on most of my slides, my background color is white and my foreground color is our Michigan blue. This analyzer tool will tell us that I'm showing a contrast ratio of 15.1 to 1, and I have a lot of green check marks that say pass. So I have followed the WCAG guidelines to ensure my minimum color contrast is 4.5 to 1 or greater. So white background, blue text is a very good color contrast. It's a lot of high contrast in my colors. In my second example, I'm using a background color of purple and keeping my foreground color or my text color of blue. You can see here, this is much harder to read. It's a very low contrast. We can also see from our analyzer tool, this is showing a contrast ratio of 1.6 to 1. And I see a lot of red X's and fail, telling me that this is not good color contrast. So again, download that tool. It can be really helpful to make sure that you're showing appropriate minimum color contrast of 4.5 to 1. But an easy way to remember this is just use light text on a dark background or dark text on a light background. But because nothing can ever be plain and simple, we don't recommend white on black or black on white because sometimes that can give us too much contrast, which can lead to screen glare. Now talking about conveying information with color. So color should never be used as the only means of conveying information, and we should also include text descriptors, which would be helpful for anyone who maybe is colorblind. So if we look at the first 2 images here, the first shows a pie chart with orange, blue, and green. But if we put this in grayscale, it's now a pie chart of gray. and there's no way to identify which color might mean what. So if our example is that orange shows the number of people who have stated yes, we cannot identify that in this second image. But if we use text descriptors, even when we turn this to grayscale, we can easily identify which of these pieces of the pie mean yes. So again, never convey information only with color. Use those text descriptors if you can. Some tips for the layout of your slides. We recommend leaving some blank space at the bottom. What this does is allows room for the cart captioner to have their information appear without blocking any of your content. Or if someone marks something in the chat, it can also pop up onto your screen without it'll help prevent any of that overlap. So if you have your camera on, also consider where it might be appearing on the screen. Generally, we do a lot of workshops as webinars, and my camera image will appear in the upper right-hand corner. So I always make sure that that corner has no information in it so that it's never going to be blocking any of that information with my picture. We're almost through our general guidelines. So let's talk about reading order. So reading order is simply just the order in which the items on our page or our slide are read off to someone who is using a screen reader. So we want to think about how we want the information on our page to be conveyed to the individual who's viewing it. The reading order should always begin with a title, and then the rest is kind of up to you. So think about how you want someone to get this information delivered to them and make that your reading order. So in the example here, in our image on the right, our reading order shows the title, which again should always be first. Then it shows our text will be read next in order, followed by our picture and its alt text. And then lastly, about sharing your slides. So if you're taking all of the time to create this accessible PowerPoint presentation, you've corrected any error that might have been there, and now it's accessible to the most people as possible, don't throw away all of that hard work and effort by converting your PowerPoint to a PDF. Because PowerPoint is a Microsoft product and PDFs are an Adobe product, they don't necessarily communicate with one another really well. So when you convert to a PDF, a lot of those steps that you took to make your PowerPoint accessible are going to be lost, and you'll need to redo a lot of that work in Adobe, which is fine. If you're really good at doing that, no big deal. But if you're not, or you're new to it, we might recommend that instead of converting, you can create a read-only version of your PowerPoint and share that. Or you can share an accessible PowerPoint and an accessible PDF. So you can choose what works for you, but don't throw away all your hard work. Okay, now we're quickly just going to talk about alt text and when and how to use it. So alt text is also known as alternative text, helps visually impaired people understand the meaning behind an image. It is also going to be displayed when an image fails to load. So think about when someone's emailed you an image or you've gone to a web page, you'll see a little box there and it looks like a broken picture. That's where it's going to display that alt text. We want to make sure we're keeping our alt text very short and descriptive. So ask yourself these 3 questions. Why are you sharing this image? What is the purpose of including it? And how would you describe it if you were talking to someone on the phone? So asking yourself those 3 questions will help you figure out what you need to write as the alt text for your image. And then lastly, just a very quick tip. When you're writing your alt text, you never have to use image of or photo of in your description because a screen reader will do that automatically. So it will include image of, and then whatever you've used of your alt text. So let's talk about when to use it. So think about the purpose of including your image. So here I have a picture of a miniature horse. Is the purpose to include information or to provide context for my presentation? I need to include alt text. If the purpose of including this image is simply because it's a fun image, it's making the slide interesting, that is simply decorative, and I don't have to include alt text. So let's use an example. So it's the same picture of a miniature horse. But my context has changed. So rather than being a presentation about accessible guides, our presentation is now about service animals. So a good piece of alt text for this image would describe specifically what is in the image: a brown miniature horse wearing a purple vest, a purple harness, and white shoes. So again, think back to how would you describe this to someone who's maybe on the phone with you? Some bad alt text for this image would simply be animal. That's not giving me any context. It doesn't explain why I'm including this image in my presentation. Another example is picture of a miniature horse. And this is bad alt text because a screen reader is now going to read this as image of picture of a miniature horse. So we're duplicating information there. And also, it's not descriptive enough. We're simply stating this is a miniature horse. But our presentation is about service animals. It's not giving us an indication of why we're including this image. Why is it important? And lastly, I want to talk about AI generated alt text. So again, that same image of that miniature horse, AI generated the following alt text: a pony being carried by a person. So this is not great because it's not a pony, though I can see in some situations, some people might not know that distinction, and that's okay. But it's also not a pony being carried by a person. It doesn't provide us any context of why is this image in my presentation. In our second image, AI generated alt text is a horse and pony with red blankets. So this is a little bit better. It is a little bit more descriptive, but we're probably still going to need to modify our alt text depending on what it's trying to convey, what its importance is. So even though alt text really is getting better, it's improved a lot in the last couple of years, it's not always the most effective and it's not always correct. An accessibility check is going to pick up on the fact that this was AI generated and ask you to review it. So you always should verify that the alt text that's being generated from AI is really what you want to share. Okay, before we get into our remediation activity, I want to take a moment and allow anyone any questions that you might have over all of that information that we shared. So I think we have a couple people helping to monitor the chat. Have we had any big questions come in yet? Okay, not hearing any and not seeing any in a quick review in the chat. Let's go ahead and start our remediation activity. So again, you should all have a copy of your slides. Feel free to open that into Microsoft Office, and you can remediate along with us, or you can just follow along as we do it together. I do have a quick poll question that I want to share. Angie, I think maybe you can pop that into the chat for me. Is it popping up in there? I can't tell. Okay, I'm seeing some people shake heads.
Erin, I don't have that poll question.
Oh, okay. It might not have popped up for this meeting. That's okay. So we'll just do a quick poll question via the chat, or you can use the raise hand feature. So the poll question is trying to just discern how much experience everyone has with creating accessible presentations. So raise your hand or pop in the chat. If you are brand new, you've never used the accessibility checker to create an accessible PowerPoint presentation before. Okay, I see a few that have never used it, a few brand new. I see some hands coming up. Someone's used it a few times. Okay, great. So we're going to use this as a kind of very beginner level. What we're going to do is everyone can feel free to unmute and ask questions or shout out answers, however you feel comfortable engaging. So we're going to start our remediation activity on slide number 25. So let's all open our accessibility checker. So we're going to go up to our ribbon bar at the top of our screen and click on Review, and then check accessibility. You should now all see a window that's popped up on the right side of your screen that's going to look just like this one that's here on my slide. So in this accessibility check, before we go into all the details, I want you to take a look at this checkbox right underneath it. It says, keep accessibility checker running while I work. I always keep this checked because that's what pops up this information down here in the lower left, which will tell me accessibility investigate if I have issues, or it'll say accessibility good to go if the checker's not finding any issues for us. So now that we have our accessibility checker open, we can see that there are some areas where we're missing alt text. We have hard to read text contrast. We need to check a reading order. We have a duplicate slide title, and we need to review that auto-generated alt text. So one thing to remember with this accessibility checker is it is going to pick up on a lot of things and help you by guiding you through how to correct some of these issues, but it's not going to pick up on everything. So that slide from the beginning that I said, remember this, this is one of the most important slides. It's not going to pick up if you've used font size that's too small, or your spacing between your lines or your paragraphs are off. So those are things that you're going to have to remember and check all on your own. But most everything else, the accessibility checker will help you with. Okay, slide 26, typography issues. So again, feel free to participate via the chat. You can unmute, you can raise a hand, whatever works best for you. So on this slide, I've used a serif font because it looks fun. Has it become more difficult to read than when I was using that sans serif font? When my line spacing gets too close together, does it become even more difficult to read? Now imagine you've had a really long day in front of your screen and your eyes are fatigued. Do those lines of text start to bleed together? Do you feel like you need to zoom in on the text in order to read it? Does it make you want to stop reading what's written here? So that text that I use that's a little bit smaller is actually 17-point font. So keep that in mind when I ask this first question of what type of font should I use? So here I've used a serif font, but what should I use? And you can drop that in the chat or unmute and let me know. All right, I'm seeing in the chat, I should be using sans serif fonts. Yes, absolutely. So how do I change my font? So I want to adjust this from a serif to a sans serif. There's a few different ways to do that. One of the easiest is to simply just highlight your text and then go up to your home tab on the top of your screen, click in that text font box, and then type in your new font style. So one of the fonts that I like to use the most is Verdana. So I can type that in there, hit enter, and now all of my font has changed to a sans serif font. So that's a quick and easy way to fix my type of font. Still have some other issues on this page, but we're going to go on to our next one where we're going to talk about our font size. I do see a hand raised. Does someone have a question?
So I'm seeing the same inspection results from slide 23 when I try to inspect slide 26, and I don't know how to get it to update.
I'm not sure what you mean by inspection. Is it saying something about the generated alt text?
Well, like the inspection results on the top right, the errors, they're still tied to slide 23, even though I've advanced to 26. I'm not seeing different errors.
Yes. Yes. So the accessibility check is not going to identify to us that our font size or our font type are errors. So those won't show up on your accessibility checker at all. What you're seeing for slide 23 is about the alt text, which we're not going to fix that piece in our remediation project, but we're going to have different alt text that we're going to adjust.
Okay.
So we'll kind of set that one aside for just a moment, but we will talk about the alt text and how to remediate that in just a few more slides. Okay, so let's go to slide number 27, where we're going to correct our font size. So on this slide, I'm using 14 point. So Obviously, it's very much too small. The accessibility checker's not going to pick up on this, but the people who are trying to read it probably will. So what font size should I use? And how do I adjust it? So what is that minimum font size that I should be using according to our guidelines? Okay, I'm seeing in the chat, a few people have said 16 point is our minimum. I'm seeing a couple 18 there. So 18 is not our minimum, but it is our recommended minimum. So we definitely want to adjust our font size to no less than 16 point, but also remember bigger is better. So let's adjust our font size to 24 point, which is typically what I will use on my slides for content. So like we did to change our font type, we can just highlight our text. And now we'll come up here to where it currently says 14, and let's adjust that to 24. So that's a quick and easy fix. Again, not picked up by our accessibility checker. This is just one of those things that we need to remember. Okay, moving on to slide number 28, correcting our paragraph spacing. So our text on this slide is too close together and it's making this harder to read. How do I increase my line spacing and what should I increase it to? So what's our guideline for our minimum line spacing? Okay, I see a couple answers in the chat. It's 1.5, yes. So this is another one where you have a couple of different options for how to change your line spacing. But my favorite is to simply highlight your text, and you'll see up here on your ribbon, this paragraph section. There's an icon here. It's got 2 arrows next to 4 horizontal lines. That's your line spacing icon. If you click on that, you can quickly come in here and adjust it to 1.5. So remember, 1.5 is your minimum. You can always do more. So let's go ahead and adjust this to 2 point. You can see I can now read this much simpler. There's a lot more space in between each of my lines of text. Okay, slide number 29. So this is where we're going to start seeing some of these errors pop up in our accessibility checker on the right side of our screen. So slide 29 says this slide has a title. Let's go ahead and click on slide 30. This slide has the same title. What do we need to do? So if we look over here in our accessibility checker, you'll see under tips, it's telling us there's a duplicate slide title. If we click on that, and it'll tell us what slide has the duplicate title, slide number 30. If we hit that down arrow, it gives us our recommended action. It tells us what we need to do in order to make that adjustment. So go ahead, everyone who's following along, click that edit slide title. And you'll see that it's now highlighted your text on slide number 30. What should we correct this slide title to? What's a simple and easy fix to make sure that we have no duplicate titles? I'm seeing in the chat, someone has said continued, or add a 1 of 2 and 2 of 2. That's perfect. So let's just do a comma and we can write continued. And you'll see now on your accessibility check, that item has disappeared. So you've officially corrected one of those items and made your presentation more accessible. So on to slide number 31. This is where we're going to talk about correcting images that are missing alt text. So a little bit of context here is that I'm giving a presentation about different types of flowers that are growing near Burton Memorial Tower. What's some alt text that I should use for these images on my screen? So if we take a look at this one first, what would we describe this image as? And you can even see over here on our accessibility checker, it's telling us that on slide 31, we have 2 images that are missing alt text. So let's talk about this one on the right side of our screen first. Does anyone have any suggestion for what some good alt text might be? Okay, someone's talking about yellow and red tulips. That's a very good start. but can we be a little bit more descriptive? So remember that we're talking about flowers that are growing near a specific place. There we go. Bright sunny day with yellow tulips in the foreground, Burton Memorial Tower in the background, light yellow tulips in front of Burton Tower. Perfect. So these are great examples. So let's all go in and add in our missing alt text. So we can do this in two ways. We can come over here to the accessibility check and click on that drop-down arrow and add a description. Or we can also just right-click on our image and view our alt text. And you can see this box is empty, so we need to put some information in there. So I've already given us an example here, so I can just type that in over here in this box. Yellow, purple, and red tulips grow near Burton Memorial Tower. So I now have alt text there. And when I go back to my accessibility check, you'll see that now I'm only missing alt text on one image on slide 31, which is this one here on the left side on the bottom of my screen. What's some good alt text for this image? This may be a trick question. What can we use here? Okay, there we go. I had someone is asking, is this decorative? So let's think about that for a second. My presentation is about flowers that are growing near Burton Memorial Tower. This is an image of a monarch butterfly. Is it providing us any additional information or context about our presentation? If the answer is no, this is decorative. So let's go ahead over here. We'll click on the item that's missing alt text, and we can just click mark as decorative. And then now you'll see that issue on our list is gone. We can also do that by right-clicking on the image, viewing the alt text, and you'll see there is a little icon there for mark as decorative. So this means that when a screen reader picks this up, it's going to ignore it. So this is simply something added to our presentation just to provide some interest. It's got no content. It is decorative. Great job, everyone. Slide number 32. So we're going to go through this one slowly because I think this is the one that people have some of the most difficult time understanding. Reading order and how do we correct it? So again, think about what makes the most sense logically. We want a logical reading order. What should our reading order always start with? Title. Exactly. So that's A. A is our title. Right up here, we see A. So what would come next in our logical reading order? So our example here is B. My slide title, text boxes, and any images should be in the correct order. C, what order makes the most sense for this slide? D is a colorful image of a duck. And E is, if you tab through the slide, the current reading order is B, A, D, E, C. So think about that and how it looks on your slide. Does that seem logical? Probably not. So if we look over here at our accessibility check, it also tells us we need to check our reading order on slide number 32. So everyone go ahead and click on that, and it'll say our recommended action is to verify our object order. So this is very simple to adjust your reading order because you're just going to grab each one of these and move it into the order that makes sense. So we want A to come first, right? Because that's our title. So we're going to find on here, it's number 2 on our list currently. Let's just drag that into spot number 1. So currently our reading order starts with A and then goes to B. So B is my slide title, text boxes, and images should be in the correct order. That kind of makes sense to come next, right? So really what we're doing is just trying to best understand how would we go about reading this information on the screen? What order do we want that image to appear? So if it makes sense and it's logical, put your reading order in that order that makes sense and is most logical for you and how you want the people seeing or reading your presentation to read through it. Sometimes that might be top to bottom, left to right. Other times it might be an image first, followed by any text. So it's kind of whatever makes sense for your specific presentation, but title always comes first. Okay, moving on to our next slide. Oh, I see a question pop up. Will screen readers grab that Google shape text as well? That stuff has been popping up quite a bit in PowerPoint selection pane. It does not. So it will not read the Google shape piece that's written over here on our reading order slide. That's one of those things where when I say I'm not an accessibility expert, I don't have an answer for you as to why sometimes that will say Google shape instead of title. But I do see that a lot as well. So that's something I'm actively trying to find an answer to, but I don't have that one just yet. But hopefully I'll find out soon. So back to slide 33, where we're going to correct our color contrast. So remember, we have that color contrast analyzer tool that we can download from the Software Center. So in doing that, I have found out that the text contrast for this line, if my text is difficult to read due to poor color contrast, how can I fix the issue? I know that this contrast is 1.5 to 1. Who remembers what our minimum color contrast should be? 4.5 to 1. Very good. So the higher the number, the better. So how do we fix poor color contrast? Similar to how we corrected our font size or our font style, you can also just highlight your text and you can come up here to font color. I'm currently on the accessibility tab of my ribbon, but you can also come over here to home and then you can select under the font box a different font color here. So let's use this dark blue text. It should now be a lot easier to read. If you specifically want to go in and see what is my contrast ratio now, definitely use that tool. It can be really, really helpful. There's also the possibility of inspecting your presentation without color. So this comes in handy when we're talking about conveying information by color only. So if we pop something into grayscale, can we still get all of the information out of it? So to inspect without color, let's go back up here to that top ribbon, click on accessibility, and then you'll see that inspect without color icon appear at the top of your ribbon. And you'll see it just throws everything into a grayscale. So you'll easily be able to identify if you've made that mistake and forgot to input some text descriptors for your color. Okay, so that was the end. So you should all now be experts in creating accessible presentations. For those of you who may not feel quite like experts yet, what questions have you got for me? You can feel free to unmute and ask a question, or you can pop it in the chat. If you prefer to ask your questions privately, you can do that as well. That's perfectly fine. We have shared some information on the latter slides of our presentation for how you can contact us. This can be as simple as submitting a question or consultation request, and we'll happily meet with you or email you to discuss your questions in private. But if anyone has a question now, feel free to go ahead and unmute and we'll help out.
All right, this is Allison speaking. Since we have more than one hand raised, I'll go ahead and call. Cameron, it looks like you were first.
Oh, thank you. And I appreciate this presentation. It's really helpful. I have two quick questions. I wonder if you have any recommended practices around aspect ratios, just because that can impact things like margins and readability that way. And secondly, I wondered if you had any recommendations for providing automatic captioning for lectures. I think that's a feature in PowerPoint, and I see you sent us this really interesting link, streamtext.net. I was curious to know more about that and if there are other options we may have.
So the first part of your question about aspect ratio, unfortunately, I'm definitely not an expert when it comes to that. But if you would like to send me a message so I have your contact information, I'll get you in touch with someone who can answer those questions for you. As far as the captioning, we are using CART transcription service. So that is something additional that we can add on to help with accessibility. However, you're correct. PowerPoint does allow you to use captions as well while you are presenting. So if you're simply trying to create a more accessible, inclusive environment, yes, absolutely feel free to use that kind of built-in captioning. But if someone has requested an accommodation for captioning, those built-in subtitles generally do not rise to quite the level that we would be looking for that accommodation. So we would want to secure something like CART in that situation. But just for a general inclusive presentation, we always love subtitles.
Right. Allison again. Next raised hand, Scott.
Hey, thank you for this presentation. This is very, very helpful. You mentioned something to download from the Software Center. Could you go into a little bit more detail about that?
Yeah, I can actually show you how to do it. So perhaps we can all do it along as well. So if you just go down to the search box at the bottom of your screen or wherever that might be, you can type in Software Center, and that will open the Software Center app. Hopefully it's going to show on my screen and not take too terribly long. But within the Software Center, you'll want to download the Color Contrast Analyzer. And we're going to use British spelling. So we're going to throw an extra letter in there, COLOUR. When that pops up, I'm sorry, my Software Center always runs really, really slow. So I'm just going to open it from my menu here. This is the Color Contrast Analyzer tool. So if you download that, it gives you this eyedropper, which you can pick up any color. So I can use it up here and pick up the blue from this specific screen, and it's going to give me my contrast ratio, which tells me it's 3.5 to 1 if my foreground color was black. So black text on blue, not super great. So here we are really slowly popping in. I should have typed in more words. So if I type in color contrast, it will hopefully pop up here. While that's loading, we can show you a little bit more of the color contrast analyzer, which is here. So generally we're looking at our foreground color. It's typically going to be like our text, and our background color is going to be whatever we're putting our text on top of. Again, my Software Center is really, really slow to load, but I promise you it is in there. There it is, finally appeared. So you can just download that. You do not, as far as I know, you do not need any special permission from ITS or HITS to be able to download. So as long as you're throwing in that extra British spelling, it should pop up for you.
Thank you.
Hey, great questions. Are there any more questions? I see someone put in the chat if there's an accessibility checker for Google Slides. I don't believe that there is. You can open PowerPoint presentations in Google Slides and make some adjustments and things in there, similar to how you're going to adjust them in PowerPoint. Personally, I feel like when you open one in Google and then open it later in a Microsoft Office product, it kind of does that same sort of thing as it does when you're converting to Adobe, where some of that information might be lost. I would generally recommend try to stick with one program so that you're not going back and forth and losing some of that accessibility. Hey, any other questions?
This is Allison. It looks like a few of our perhaps Michigan Medicine employees are, as well as our academic, are not showing the checker. So yes, I definitely recommend hitting the little IT help button on the bottom of your university computer and asking. We do not have any special permissions. So Michigan Medicine is definitely different. And it looks like some people are finding it with color with the correct or the American spelling and not English. So try that as well. They may have updated that. Other than that, I do not see any additional questions, but now is the time. We still have a few more minutes if anybody has more questions for Erin.
Hello, Erin. This is Angie. There is a question from Jimmy about, and Jimmy states, I teach PowerPoint slides as part of my writing class. Would it be okay to present these slides to students as attributed?
Yes, absolutely. My only request is that you leave that little accessibility note at the beginning. We do not ever want to share any information, any documents that are inaccessible. We don't want to knowingly share anything that is inaccessible. And because we know that this presentation is inaccessible because it's meant to be for practice and for learning, please just keep that disclaimer there so that everyone is aware that these were intentional errors for learning purposes. But yes, share away. Tell all of your friends and family. The more people who know how to create things accessibly, the better off we are. Okay, I'm not hearing too many other questions, so I just want to say thank you all for popping in and spending some time with us today. I do recommend practicing this as much as you can. It doesn't really take a long time to kind of make it become just second nature to get in and make sure that you're creating these things accessibly. And you'll really find that you're going to end up being kind of the point person for your unit, and you'll be able to share all of this new information with others so that they can create accessibly as well. However, if you do find that the next time you're creating a presentation, if you're having some trouble, let us know. We're happy to help. We can share some more tips. We don't remediate on a large scale, but we're happy to help with whatever learning objectives that you might have in order to be able to do this on your own in the future. So again, thank you all for popping in. Feel free to let us know if you need us as time goes by. Thank you all. Have a great day.